Wonderful. Welcome, everyone, to the 3-minute reset. This is the science of walking for busy professionals. And I am really happy to share so much of what I have learned about walking as a tool for the workplace. And I promise you, this isn't going to be a lecture on why exercise is important, because I know everybody knows this. My goal for today is to really help you understand how we can use this as a real tool for the workplace specifically. So to kick it off, I'm wondering if anyone here besides me is craving more energy, specifically at work. I don't know if this feels familiar, but maybe you have back-to-back meetings, maybe you have a lot of context switching, quick checking email, back to meetings, back and forth. Or maybe you find yourself grabbing coffee or snacks for breaks, but you still feel foggy. It can be a constant battle of fatigue in the workplace, and it's really effective to have helpful, really research-backed tools to help you actually reset. And I know we all love a good vacation or a getaway retreat, but that's not often possible. And so, what I'm talking about here is a reliable way to reset, one that actually works at 2:30 on a Tuesday. So today we're going to talk about why most breaks that we take don't actually work. We will talk about what actually recharges you, and then we'll learn this simple 3-minute reset. It's 4 steps, and I'm hoping it can be something you can remember and take away and use immediately. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jen Ottaveggio. I'm a life and leadership coach. I spend a lot of my time helping people navigate high demand, fast paced work environments without burning out. And one of the things I see over and over is that people aren't actually taking breaks that help them really reset. They're staying in the same state all day. And I am absolutely working on this myself. So I'm here with you. And today we're going to talk about this tool to really help to see if we can really help reset ourselves when we notice we need a reset. So I want to just start by getting a sense of where we're at now. So let's imagine it's 2:30 on a Tuesday and you have lots to do, but you feel very, very low energy. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat box, what do you typically do when you have a lot to do, but you feel low energy? Go ahead and type it in the chat. There is zero judgment here, so please be honest. Um, and you might have a few things that you do, but I encourage you to just be honest. Coffee, a few deep breaths, awake caffeinated chocolate. Ooh, I haven't heard of that. Listen to disco. Yes. Eat a snack. What else do I do? Take my dog for a walk. Love that. Drink more coffee or water. Coffee. Yes, turn to caffeine. That is yeah, get up and get more water. Wonderful. Thank you. And sometimes run a mile or two. Awesome. Yeah, I think those are very common. Those are very common coping techniques. I listed some of them out here, and yeah, power through. Checking email. Nobody mentioned social media scroll. I'm not sure if you all are just more elevated, but a lot of folks scroll on their phone, or checking email can often be used as a like a stalling tactic. Your brain thinks it requires less energy, so it goes to that as a almost as a procrastination tool, but you're telling yourself that it's actually productive. But I just want to note with the first 4 things that I have listed here, you're in the same physical state typically. Like you're seated, you're at a desk, maybe you're at a computer. You just have different content. So just naming that. And then some of the other options like coffee, that can be a great way to shift your energy. Absolutely. A snack is not inherently a bad thing at all. But what you'll notice, I'm sure we've all noticed, is that your healthy limit for coffee and your healthy limit for snacks can be quickly reached. And going outside and moving are really, really great tools. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. Most of those breaks outside of movement and going outside don't work. And I just want to name a little more specifically why. And I want to name that it's not because you're doing them wrong. It's just because they're not creating a real shift. So let's look at what's usually happening. So yeah, if you're staying seated and your body doesn't move, your physiology doesn't change. So you're in the same position, the same posture, the same energy. On the second note, if you are continuing with screen, if you're currently using a screen and you need a reset and you continue to use screens, like checking email, scrolling, switching tabs, your brain is still working. It is still processing, it's still deciding, it's still reacting. So even though may feel like a break, you're still under what we call a cognitive load. And so, if the summary here is if there's no shift in your body, your breath, or your attention, you're thinking about the same things, breathing the same way, holding the same kind of tension, it's very hard to reset. So it has been said many times in many ways, but I do like this way of saying, kind of summarizing this main point, which is if you want things to be different, you have to do something different. Seems obvious, but let's talk about specifically what to physically do. So the best way to really reset is to open with a pattern interrupt. So most people think taking a break is just stopping. But what your brain and body actually needs is a shift. So shift being the key word here over break. So the first thing is with the body, and I recommend this with movement. You could even do this by dancing. Someone mentioned putting on disco music. Now that is a good way to really physically shift your environment. You're looking for energy movement, circulation. So when you're standing and staring at a screen, sitting and staring at a screen, your system can feel stagnant. So you want movement to increase blood flow and oxygen to the brain, and that's what helps you feel more alert. So just remember, energy comes from circulation, not stillness. The second is shifting your attention. So this is for example, when you're looking at a computer screen, you have a what's called a narrow focus. The most of our day is spent in a narrow focus. Maybe you're to Zoom, Slack, email, and that's cognitively demanding. So when you step away and you let your attention widen, looking around, noticing your environment, you give your brain a break from that intensity. And your brain resets when your attention widens. So even now, if you can just experiment with this, instead of looking at me and the screen, see if you can look out a window and see if you can focus your eyes on the furthest possible thing out a window. By the way, eye doctors also recommend this as a really healthy way to maintain eye health. But outside of that, it actually has notable effects on the brain. And then the last thing is your breath. And this was mentioned, and I love seeing that people are doing this, but your breath is one of the fastest ways to signal safety to your nervous system. So even if you don't recognize this, let's say you're kind of quickly responding to emails, there's some stress, there's maybe a fire drill, your nervous system gets activated, and that puts you more in the fight or flight state. What you really want to be in is this kind of critical thinking, more high executive functioning state. And so even a few slower, fuller breaths can really downshift stress and bring you back to baseline. So the summary here is that your breath tells your body whether you're safe or stressed. And so if you think about these things, moving the body, attention, and breath, you'll notice that walking hits all three of these things at once. So if you're moving your body, your attention naturally widens when you're walking and your breath starts to regulate. So that's why it works so quickly. I want to also just name some more specifics around what's actually happening in your body when you go for a short walk. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with bilateral movement and the effects of bilateral movement, but this kind of rhythmic back and forth, right and left motion can calm and organize the nervous system. It has this steady left-right rhythm, and that repetition calms the nervous system and it helps your brain organize and process what's going on. This is actually used in trauma therapy and all sorts of other modalities, but immensely beneficial for day-to-day processing of life. It actually helps you think through things instead of just spinning. The second bullet here is that it actually increases blood flow to the brain. So movement increases oxygen and that helps everything work better. So think of it like better blood flow results in clearer thinking. And the last bullet here, as I mentioned, it naturally slows and deepens your breathing. So you'll find more of a natural rhythm that you don't really have to force. Your breath starts to kind of find its own natural rhythm automatically. So think of it as not getting away from your desk. Think of it as actively shifting multiple systems in your body at once. I like to say that walking is a high ROI because it stacks the benefits. And I know we're all looking for efficiency here. So again, I'm not going to get into the physical benefits of exercise. You all know that beyond all of the biological factors like lowering cortisol, improving mood, reducing stress, there are so many psychological impacts. In other words, it's not just great for your physical body to exercise, it's great for your brain. This Harvard psychiatrist, John Ratey, puts it like this: exercise is the single best thing you can do for your brain. And walking is just a very accessible version of that. So I know you all know this. I want to focus on two pieces that are specifically important for work in the workplace. And those two pieces that walking really supports that aren't often talked about is creative thinking and focus. So just want to give you kind of a little science behind this before we jump in. There was a research study out of Stanford that showed that walking boosts creative thinking by about 60%. So there's actual solid research behind this. That's a big jump for something so simple. And this isn't just for creative work. So if it's not like for artists or whatever, this shows up when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're trying to write something, or maybe make a decision, or maybe just when you feel kind of mentally stuck. In this study, about 8 out of 10 people performed better while walking than sitting. And by the way, it didn't actually matter if they were walking outside or on a treadmill indoors, which I thought was actually just really useful data point. Um, and then the last icing on the cake really is that they say that the benefits of this increased creativity continued after the walk. So you're not really losing time by stepping away if you do it correctly. You're actually improving the quality of your thinking when you come back. So that's why the kind of pushing through when you feel stuck can sometimes backfire. So the summary here is walking will probably get you unstuck faster than pushing through. And there is a reason why so many great leaders, Steve Jobs was known to do lots and lots of walking meetings. Um, there's a reason why this is such a ubiquitous thing. In fact, it was long ago said that all truly great thoughts are conceived by walking. I'm not sure. Has anyone had an experience of this? Feel free to raise your hand in the chat if you've experienced really great kind of creative flow when you get out and get on a walk. This happens to me often. The other piece that I want to mention, so we talked about creativity. Attention is something that, with the increase of diagnoses in ADHD and everyone struggling to preserve their attention with all of these tools that are designed to suck our attention, I feel like it's really important to name what types of attention there are and how walking can shift us more into getting the focus for work stuff that we really need to do our jobs well. So there was a study that essentially named two different types of attention. One type is directed attention, and this requires effort. It's something that you're intentionally doing. It's your voluntary kind of you're electing to focus on this thing. And it is prone to fatigue. Most of our kind of daily work tasks are directed attention. The other type of attention is involuntary attention. And this is the type of attention that comes automatically when you are engaged in something that actually just inherently fascinates you. Some kind of stimuli. Imagine you're on a walk and you're like, oh, a bird. That's called involuntary attention. Whereas if you're trying really hard to stay on the path, that's more directed attention. So, the study essentially illuminated that natural settings, at being outside in nature, tend to elicit involuntary attention really gently and regularly, which allows the directed attention mechanisms to rest and recover. So, this is the big thing. If you want more directed attention, it's very helpful to tap into involuntary direct attention in order to give that directed attention part of you some space to rest. You with me here? The takeaway is that focus resets, if you really want to improve your focus, it is supported by nature and being out in nature because we know your directed attention gets fatigued. Nature can restore that attention, and even brief exposure helps. It is not necessary, but it is helpful. So, to summarize here, walking generates capacity for more creativity, more focus, this kind of directed attention, more energy, regulation, positive mood. And I really, really like to name this as really a reframe that walking is a support tool for doing great work. It's not an escape. It's not even necessarily a break if that helps you lean into taking advantage of this tool. So I know some of us are really inclined to keep sitting and pushing through when it is no longer serving us to the best of our ability. And that's why my hope is if you understand how the brain works, you can really support it most effectively. So let's talk about how to actually do this practically in our normal kind of day-to-day life. Here's what I recommend. I recommend no outfit change. No perfect location, no long time block. And the goal is to make it really accessible, and that's why I say 3 minutes. Would 5 minutes probably be better? Probably. But what I trust is that if you have footwear that is comfortable enough to walk for 5 minutes, maybe this footwear here in this picture works for some, but not for others. You know yourself. But I recommend lowering the barrier to entry as much as possible and removing as much friction as possible. It doesn't need to be complicated. And I want to walk through exactly what to do on this walk. Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah, I've definitely resolved some interpersonal problems by taking a walk with that person. Yes. It really is so useful to do this as a way to shift your thinking. So, what we're going to do here, I'm going to walk through this framework and then we're going to see if we can do it in practice. So, just know if you do decide to take a little walk, we're going to be going through these four steps and I'll walk you through them right now so you're really clear on what they are. So, step one is noticing the trigger. This is essentially the signal that you need a reset. And sometimes we don't notice until too much time has gone by. We've wasted time. We've missed the window. So, some examples of this noticing, you might notice you start to get irritated. I notice it most when I am starting to get lose my posture and I feel like my energy is starting to slump. You may also notice the feelings of stuckness, maybe spinning thoughts, or maybe just kind of sluggish or foggy. So that's the first step. You got to notice when you need to take a break. The key is to catch it early. And the skill here is not avoiding stress. Like stress is going to happen. It's noticing it sooner. So if you can catch it early, then you can move to step two, which is the move piece. This is when you actually just start walking. So not to overthink it, it's just changing your state. If you want to start dancing, anything that's different than your current kind of seated state. And the invitation here is to not wait to feel calm or ready before you move. Movement is actually what creates the shift. I hope that feels kind of clear. The third step is regulate. So this is what you're doing while you're walking. And many of us listen to podcasts or text or whatever it is we're doing while walking. And that's not all bad. But I want to name three specific things that you can do to regulate yourself, which actually, this is kind of a critical piece of the equation. So I like to think of regulation from top to bottom. That's just how I remember it. So at the top, the first thing is your that I come to is my eyes. So you want to widen your gaze while you're walking. This happens naturally, of course, but I want to tell you that when you pull out of tunnel vision, which is this more stress state, and you pull out into your peripheral vision, that's what shifts your physiology. It actually tells you your nervous system to downregulate. Um, so you're widening your gaze, you're taking in your surroundings. The second piece is slowing your breath. So this is really just seeing if you can notice your breath and find a rhythm. And ideally, it's a little slower and more rhythmic. So we start with eyes, we go to breath, and then we move down with the body. And then I focus on my feet. I focus on simply feeling the contact with the ground. The right, left. This bilateral stimulation grounds you and stabilizes you, and it mirrors how the nervous system unwinds. So think about this when we're stressed, everything narrows our vision, our breath, our thinking, and this framework reverses that. So step four is when you're done with you're moving, you're regulating, you're thinking top down. Step four, you return. So this is returning back to work, closing the loop. And I always like to ask myself this question kind of at the end of my walking resets. What matters most next? And that allows me to re-enter my work more deliberately so that you're not just calming down, you're choosing how you want to come back, how you want to return. So, this is a really great way to, instead of thinking your way through stress, to actually just shift your physical state instead. So, to do this together, I want to start with the first step before anybody kind of separates. So I want to start with the noticing together. So in order to simplify this, I invite you to simply ask yourself one question and please pop it in the chat box. And I just want you to ask yourself, how energized do I feel right now? And on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 is no energy, no battery left. 10 is excellent energy, full battery, ready to rock. Just name in this moment, give yourself a number, throw it in the chat box to just anchor in how we're feeling now as it relates to your energy. Okay, awesome. We've got some fours, some sixes. Great. This is really helpful for anchoring in on where we begin so that we can actually observe a change. So now that you've anchored that in for yourself, I invite you to do this practice with me. There, you have two options. Option A is you go for a walk. Within option A, you can have headphones in if you can remain connected to this Zoom, and you can follow my verbal cues and just follow along. The second option within the walking is if you don't have headphones, you can simply walk for 3 minutes and remember those three things. Widen your gaze, slow your breath, and feel your feet. And then after 3 minutes, come back and we'll do the debrief together. Does that make sense for the walking portion if you're going to walk? And then option B, if you do not want to walk right now, it doesn't feel accessible or supportive, I invite you to stay at your desk and just simply follow along with my kind of guided visualization for the walkers and see if you can bring that like maybe some subtle movement, like a posture shift, or you can even kind of tap alternating as if you were walking, alternating sides of the body. And you will get a similar type of experience in doing that. So, does everyone know what they're going to choose if you will be walking or staying at your desk? Actually, write in the chat box if you're willing to just name who's going walking. Okay. Okay. So we have a mixture. Wonderful. All right. Well, if you, great, desk bound, but I did walk 10 minutes at lunch. Okay. So for those of you that are going walking, I invite you to get up and off you go. And you can just keep your headphones in and listen to the sound of my voice. And for those of you that are staying at your desk, um, I just invite you to follow along and see if you can look away from the screen and see if you can shift your posture slightly and place your feet firmly on the ground. And I invite you all to start by bringing your attention to your eyes. And I invite you to let your gaze lift slightly. And instead of focusing on one thing, I invite you to widen your vision and see if you can tap into your peripheral vision, the things that you can see without looking directly at them. This wider vision is signaling to your nervous system that you're not in immediate danger. It's the opposite of when we're stressed and our vision narrows and we go into tunnel vision. Widening the gaze does the opposite. It helps your system downshift. So let your eyes stay soft and wide. And as you're walking, you're taking in more without focusing on anything in particular. And as you're walking or sitting, I invite you to notice if there's colors, shapes, maybe there's some movement in the trees or bushes outside your window, maybe light. No need to analyze, just let your eyes receive the visual stimuli. And as your vision widens, I invite you to notice what's happening in your physical body. And often, without even recognizing it, tension begins to soften. Your system starts to come out of that narrow, focused state. And now I invite you to bring your attention to your breath. So if you're walking, keep walking. And if you're seated, keep that wide gaze and just bring your attention to your breath. No need to force it. Just see if you can find a rhythm. And see if you can let it be a little more gentle and rhythmic. Ideally, your inhale comes in naturally, and then you allow your exhale to be just a little bit longer. And let that rhythm settle in. Just breathe in and walk in. And now I invite you to bring your attention down to your feet. Feel the contact with the ground. And if you're seated at your desk, I invite you to alternate tapping right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, just as if you would be walking. And if you're walking, I invite you to notice your heel, foot, toe, heel, foot, toe. Feel the weight shift from one side to the other. Let your attention stay low in the body, tracking that steady rhythmic movement. This is your bilateral stimulation, your anchor. Now just notice all three of these regulation tools happening together from the top to the bottom. We'll start with our gaze is wide. Our breath is steady and deep. And your feet are grounded. They're creating bilateral stimulation. You're walking, you're breathing, you're noticing. And now I invite you to slow your walk down, start to return home. And if you're seated, I invite you to bring your feet to stillness and ground them into the ground. And as you wrap up your short walkabout, it's about 3 minutes. And as you settle back into this space, I invite you to just start to notice, go back to step one and notice what you experience in your body. Specifically, I invite you to share in the chat box, how energized do you feel now after walking or after doing this seated bilateral stimulation? 0 to 10. And notice if it was an increase. Wonderful. Someone started from a 5, 6 and ended at an 8. Maureen, 8, definite increase. Yeah, I was simply alternating my feet tapping here. And I would say it's more subtle when I'm seated, but I absolutely feel more energy flowing through my body. Um, which is just really so powerful and really quite simple in a matter of 3 minutes. I also invite you to share, if you're willing, in the chat box, what changes do you notice in your physical body or in your mind? Anything come for you? I'll give you a moment. I know some of you are probably wrapping your walk still. And if someone wants to unmute and share audibly, you're so welcome to do that. Oh, my brain got less busy. Awesome. Yeah, it's that direct, you shift out of that directed focus and into the involuntary focus, that involuntary attention. That's great to hear. What happens then is when you're in this involuntary attention, it really does allow that focus part of your brain to rest, which is that feeling of like less busy, less spirally. So it's literal medicine for your brain. I just think it's so neat. Anyone else have something to share around changes they notice in their body or mind? Mm-hmm. When I do walk, I appreciate touching grass, the feeling of those urgent emails not existing in a park. Yeah, there is this sense of touching grass that is so tactile, and that's why I really named it as like feeling your feet. Um, because it cues us into our physical body and is literally grounding when you can feel the ground. And if you're not attuned to the feeling of your feet on the ground, it's really hard to be grounded. Maybe sounds obvious, but we use that term grounded in this way that feels a little smushy. But when you actually bring it into this context of like, oh, your feet need to actually be on the ground, it can be very useful. I feel much calmer in my body and clearly more settled. Ooh, yeah, I love that. Isn't that funny? Moving can help you settle. I feel so resonant with that. And I hope it's helpful to understand in the kind of biology and physiology of what's happening, why it's like, oh, yeah, that actually does make sense. Thank you all for sharing. Let me switch here to the last, um, a few more tips. So now that we've kind of completed that, I want to name when might be a good time to take a walking break. Um, I noticed they are very effective. We talked about the kind of back-to-back meetings when there's lots of quick context switching. It can be really helpful as a reset between context shifts. So maybe after a meeting or before deep work. Especially if you find yourself, this happens quite a lot to me, if you find yourself doing a lot of planning, with, spending more time doing the planning than the actual working. If you do a walking reset before, it actually allows your brain to kind of plan more quickly and just kind of get into flow of work. At least for me, that's my experience of it. If you're experiencing a mid-afternoon slump, especially if your tendency is to go for a coffee, caffeine really does stay in your system a lot longer than you think it does, and it could be affecting your sleep. And I want for all of us to have a wonderful, exquisite sleep. And so if you are turning to coffee, I think a really healthy experiment to try would be when your instinct at 3 o'clock is to get a cup of coffee, try doing a walk around the block instead and just see if you can notice some additional effects, maybe some pros and cons. Just notice what you notice. And then, of course, if you're feeling overwhelmed or like stuck, anything like that. And rain or shine, it's good to do. If you have a walking pad or a treadmill, know you can do it there too. But there is something. notable to name about nature, as we talked about, like the fresh air, just a lot of cognitive benefits from actually going outside. But if that's not possible, um, indoor movement, even, dance, stretching, anything that creates the state shift can be very supportive. Any questions? Actually, I want to go back to this and I want to just pause and ask if there are any questions about this reset framework, things that don't feel clear. Great. Okay. This is kind of, in my mind, the slide that I want you to remember because this will anchor you in when you do notice, oh gosh, I'm spiraling or I'm feeling really stuck. Then you remember to kind of get out, you start your moving, you regulate top to bottom, and then you return. So this is the slide I'm really hoping to kind of anchor in. And speaking of anchoring in, because I'm a life coach, I always like to end my sessions with some more very specific takeaways for you to design for yourself. So, my last question for all of you to reflect on is when will you try this? And I don't think you need to commit to anything for long term. I just invite you to try it and really experiment with it if it's not something that you're already doing. And if it's something that you are already doing, I hope that bringing in some more of those intentional regulation pieces of it, the widening the gaze, the kind of regulating the breath and feeling your feet on the ground, I hope that that can bring even more depth to your walking resets. Um, so I invite you to think about when will you use this? When would be the most useful time for you to try this type of reset? And then the second question is, where will you go? Sometimes designing a new route each time kind of takes more cognitive load. So I invite you, if you're just experimenting with this, I think to reduce the friction, I would say make it the simplest, repeatable path. So maybe it's just like around the block and you don't have to cross any streets. Um, Maybe it's to the end of a stretch of sidewalk and back. Think about what feels accessible, doable in any outfit, in any moment when you really know you need a reset. And I invite you to complete this sentence, which is kind of like a commitment statement. And psychologically, it really does help to, if you want to make a habit change, if you want to change how you respond to different triggers in your life, it can be really helpful to just name in the affirmative what you will do when something happens. So I invite you to complete the sentence when X happens, this is the trigger or the noticing part. I will I will what? I will walk to the end of the block. Maybe it's when I find myself in the kitchen looking for a snack after a meeting. I will take a lap around the block first. That's my example. That's what I often do. If I find myself standing in front of the refrigerator, do you ever open the refrigerator door? You're standing there. That's often a sign to me. I'm like, oh, I'm not actually hungry. I need a state shift. And so that's usually my trigger to go for a quick walk. What's coming up for you all? What are you committing to experimenting with? Mhm. When I'm procrastinating entering my time, I will get up and walk for 3 minutes. I love that. Yeah, in mid-morning, mid-afternoon is was another chat here, and that is yeah, especially the mid-afternoon seems to be a very a ripe time for a reset. When I feel stressed or rushed, I will be mindful to take a break and walk to the fair building. I love that. I'll be ready for a marathon in no time. I take the dog out. Yes, hope. I love using my dog as an excuse. I'm like, must go. My dog desperately needs a walk. But also, I do too. And as you're walking the dog, you can still have a wide gaze. You can still regulate your breath, just start to tune into your breath, and you can still feel your feet. So, love that because it's two birds, one stone. Great. I think this sounds like a really great plan. When I'm in a slump, I'll get up and walk around the office. When I'm at home, I'll go up and down the stairs for 3 to 5 minutes. Ooh, I really like that. That will get you even more of a cardiovascular shift in your nervous system. And I think that's a really great idea. And sometimes, if you're in an office building and you're up on the 17th floor, to get outside and do a walk around outside is like maybe not the most practical thing to do, like in between meetings if you have 2 minutes. But could you walk to the break room and back or around your cubicle pod? Like, even that alone creates a state shift and could be very effective. I love this idea. And I will say, if you're trying to decide if you want to do something a little more cardiovascularly intensive or less, a good rule of thumb is to think about, what do I need? And if you're feeling overwhelmed and your brain is moving really fast and you need to slow down, I invite you to take a slow walk. And if your brain is moving really slow and you're like really dragging and you need it to move faster, I invite you to do, I think the stairs is a great idea, or do a more brisk walk. So inviting in the physical actions that you want to call in more is, I think, it maybe sounds obvious. If you want to faster, move faster. If you want to move slower, move slower. But we don't often think of our brains as so connected to our bodies, but of course they are all very connected. So if you want to move faster in your brain, try moving faster in your physical body. If you want to move slower in your brain and try to calm your brain, if you have anxiety and things are moving fast, that's a good time to move slower in your physical body. Hope that makes sense. Great. Okay. Um, so to wrap up, a few tips. Remember, small shifts can result in very big impact. So the focus here is on simplicity, walking around your cubicle pod. That's great. That's accessible. Um, Personal agency, you get to choose what this looks like, and it does not have to be a marathon. Maybe that's something we're building to, but just know small shifts really have a big impact. And I like to think about this not like breaks. For some reason, my conditioning is like, the breaks feel so indulgent, even though, cognitively, I don't really think that they are. But I like for myself to reframe these as smart, effective resets, like an energy reset. Um, so the invitation here is to not wait until you're burned out to take care of your energy. This is like proactive healthcare, preventative healthcare. It's just like how you get ahead of the burnout and how you also just prepare yourself to most effectively enter that next meeting and tackle that new project and take on that next task. So hopefully this helps it feel a little more accessible. And I realize this is maybe a new concept, but just remembering the things that we learned today. If you want to have a true break that really gives you rest or really helps you shift out of what you're in now and into something different, it requires a state change. Walking can really help you recharge. And that four-step framework to reset really can work effectively in just 3 minutes, as we practiced here today. So, noticing, moving, regulating, and returning. And today you also made a walking reset experiment that supports you and that feels practical and accessible and doable. Um, one last question I'm wondering about, it's just coming to me. This is another part of what makes these habit changes really work, is figuring out how you will hold yourself accountable. Hmm. Excuse me. So I guess, yeah, my true last question is, how will you hold yourself accountable to trying this new experiment? And this isn't meant to be like a scary accountability. It's more of how will you support yourself to do this thing that you've decided would be really good for you? Any ideas around how you can make this more likely to happen for yourself? It might help inspire others if you share what's coming up for you. But how might you go about reminding yourself to do this? Or maybe even noticing sooner rather than later in that first step. Here, I'll go back to that slide to make it something that you can more anchor in on. What can you do to keep yourself more accountable? Feel free to unmute and share or share in the chat box. My Apple Watch, I get to close those rings. I'm not above a sticker. Yeah, gosh, it's so funny that my kids get stickers on their sticker chart, and we're not above that. That's gamification 101. So I think that could be really useful. And if you can use technology like your Apple Watch to help motivate you, um, that's a great idea. I really love knowing what motivates each and every one of us. And it's not cheating, it's just being smart about how we turn these things from a pretty slide into an actual behavior change. I try to take, I'll try to take a quick walk down the hall between meetings. Love it. I'm thinking of setting a timer for a known time of day when the slump happens. I love that, Maureen. And this is something you can really experiment with. You may notice that it's like kind of a timing thing and it happens at the same time. You might notice that it's more of a context switching thing. So maybe it's more around, if you're in a lot of meetings and then you need to shift into deep work and you're finding that shift is taking too long, maybe that's your cue. Um, Great. Anyone else? You know what? I have an idea that I can offer. If you have a time in your day where it feels more spacious, like this walk to the ferry building that someone mentioned, I'm not sure how long that takes, but if you actually like schedule it in, I know this feels more of like a break than a reset tool, but if you schedule it in and almost just as maybe a 15-minute block in the calendar that when you think you'll need it most. I know I live and die by my calendar, and that is more likely for it to happen. And for me, and for most humans, because we are social creatures, it is even more likely, like exponentially higher likelihood to happen if you have social accountability. So if you have a friend or a colleague, ideally someone with a similar motivation that is on the same page, maybe someone here in this meeting that you know. If you know you really want to do a walk at 2 tomorrow afternoon to try just what it feels like to do a 10-minute power walk around the block. If you invite someone to do it with you, it can really increase your chances of success. Sometimes, if it's a meeting just with ourselves, we tend to push it back. But we tend to not let other people down in the same way. So it's something to think about using social support to your advantage, especially when there's aligned goals. If someone really doesn't want to walk, then it's probably not a great support tool. But if it's someone that also wants a similar thing, it can be very useful. Wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for taking the time today. And we will be back next month with another event, so stay tuned for that coming soon. And just as a reminder, I run the monthly meditation groups for Davis Wright Tremaine, and I am so delighted to offer it. It is another great reset tool because it shifts you out of a current state and into a different state, more mental and less physical. But it can be a real supportive reset tool as well. And that is the first Tuesday of every month at 12:30 Pacific time. And so that's happening in a couple weeks. And I think without further ado, I will let you leave a couple minutes early. And I want to say thank you to all of you for coming. I so appreciate you, and I will be sending the recording out for those of you that missed it or want to revisit again.